Yeah, I thought a bit about the importance of history and reading history in general, and as a subject, how it relates to other topics and why it's important. And as with all tools and focus in life, you can overdo it, but as long as it's, an interest to someone, I think there's a ton to learn from it. But yeah, so where to begin? It's there's so much recorded history, so not obvious where to start. But for me, the most influential have been the Will Durant series, Story of Civilizations. But there are many great books out there, and it's quite, not all people perhaps appreciate the tone, but I think it's what's best with that series is that it's both those volumes, 11 thick volumes, is that it's both sort of attached to what I would consider cultural heritage in style, that preserves the good parts with tradition, and not always good part with the tradition, but I think definitely he preserves one of the most important ideals, which is not evident when you read the series. It's you can catch it up or sort of notice it, but perhaps not the first thing you think of, but the underlying tone perhaps. And that is he even though he's, for starters, he's focused on this sort of broad history of, he's again sort of picking your niche in history. He wants to take the whole picture in general. I think it's good for all sort of science and academic fields that you do, but when it comes to, that's the first thing, he basically writes about all of history in most civilizations, most focused on Europe, but Far East too. But what he does not sacrifice that is common today, these days, is the sort of the great man ideal, which he of course would also include women in too, but it's just the old way of saying it, a remnant from old times, which is perhaps not, it is what it is, but and why I think that is important is quite obvious. He has one book that speaks about the shameless worship of heroes, and that is good. If we don't adore, or at least upheld people who make significant contribution to society, what's then the incentive structure in a civilization? If you can't do that, it's just envy and jealousy. If you sort of, yeah, of course, if someone has done some bad, you should recognize it. Not all people are angels. All people have bad sides, and no one is lacks bad action in this world. But so it is not a way to defend bad action and bad values. He has one, I'm not sure if it's from him originally, but it's just a saying that perhaps you've heard, that it's something like, if you have a person, his what is it? His or her virtues is his or her own, but the vices is for the time. So for that, in that time, for example, long ago, some values that were that for modern standard would be quite bad were like horrific, but you have to have some sort of compassion with that. Is not obvious. If you're in a society, how would we behave? Would we be better than if we were born in those? Perhaps we would notice some stuff that was bad. Would we act on it? For you people do, and to be so arrogant to think you would have the courage to do it. That's an ideal, to have a courage to stand up for things that's unfair. But to judge historical characters by modern standards in morals is not always a ethical or moral thing to do. Even, doesn't mean we shouldn't criticize it, and we should have understanding that some of those things can be very uncomfortable for some groups of people, and so on and so forth, and you should have respect for that too. But anyway, so the great man ideal is something that's never mentioned. It's not obvious at all in the book, but in the general character of it, it's definitely a thread in the book. And something else I thought about that I forgot, but yeah, then history in general, as I said, it's always a thing you can overdo. But why I think it's so important is because it's sort of connected to both cultural heritage and values that are not only bad. I mean, it's on a philosophical level, when what you grew up in, like how your brain is molded, is a product of our time. It's always like that, and of course you should be a free thinker and think for yourself and try to understand what you've brought up with and get a perspective on it, but you're always sort of confined to it in some way. And so that's of course both good and a bad thing, but to get perspective on things when things are going so fast these days, improvements in values and morals and stuff, it's also good checkpoint, or sort of what should you call it, an anchor to get perspective of those changes, so that you'll notice when things go very wrong, because that's also happens with morals. I mean, I think there's a ton of suffering. I mean, these are very sensitive topics. I won't delve to all of them, but I mean, some people have immense levels of suffering as a consequence of things that have changed, I think, to morals and values. It's also true that a lot of suffering has been eliminated because of improvements in morals and ethics, but that's not like, it's not black and white. It's you have to be able to think for yourself on the values. I think history is a very good way to get perspective on those type of things, and so yeah. I could talk about this for hours, but maybe I'll throw in something more. I mean, just the general importance of being well read and have an understanding for history and all academic subjects. But yeah, one way to sort of, I mean, history probably the best way to, one of the best ways to get, yes, you really get perspective, because all scientific advances, all academic knowledge, you can see sort of how that progressed and improved. So all subjects that we delve into today, you can see the progression of all those subjects, and that gives an immense sort of, that in itself is sort of illuminating to understand that all the knowledge that we can learn, that it's not history, are a product of the historical process. I mean, it's obvious, but if you take time to appreciate that and understand that, and it's, as always, every subject can be seen as the pinnacle sort of understanding, because all subjects goes into each other. But and that's when the most interesting things happen, when you have a connection from one subject to all the others, or many of the others. So, and so one way to capture that is sort of from the psychological perspective, is that I think it was Will Durant who said it, or quoted someone else, that the best psychology is history, because it's the collective behavior, or recorded behavior of humans since the dawn of civilization. So yeah, just some thoughts about history.